In this video, we're going to study the first lesson in English Grammar 1 in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. In this first lesson, you can see the title of our lesson here. We're going to learn about objects and words. The first thing that we want to do in this course in English grammar is find out what exactly English grammar is, and we're going to do that in lesson 2. In this first lesson, we're going to talk about some ideas, some important ideas that will help us to get started and do well in English grammar. All of the content in this lesson, everything I have written here up on the board, is found in your lesson, so you can read it on your own. You don't have to worry about missing anything. Everything that I've written up here is in your lesson. I just may add some more information or may talk about things a little bit. But everything's in your lesson, so you can study all of these things on your own after you've watched this video. And you can watch this video as many times as you'd like to learn everything that I talk about. All right, so in lesson 1, the first thing that we're going to learn about as we get ready to get started in English grammar is we're going to learn about objects and words. And before we learn about objects and words, we're going to learn about perceiving things. We're going to learn about our 5 senses, and we're going to learn what it means to be conscious of something. So first, we're going to learn what it means to perceive something and how we perceive with our 5 senses. And then we're going to learn about what it means to be conscious of something, okay? Now, when God created us, He intended for us, He desires us to learn. In our catechism lesson, we learned that God made us to know Him. So God made us to know Him, to know things, to know Him, and to know all of the things that He created. And He gave us certain tools to help us to know Him, to know the truth, to know what we're supposed to know. And of these tools, some of these tools are called the senses. These aren't the only tools that God has given us, but these are some of the most important tools that God has given us so that we can know things in this life. We have 5 senses, and they're listed here and they're written in your lesson. The 5 senses are seeing, hearing, feeling, not just with our hands. Our whole bodies can feel things. We can feel heat, for example. We can feel cold. We can feel when the wind blows. So feeling doesn't just mean touch. It's our bodies are able to feel things. We can feel pains, okay? So feeling is all of that sense of feeling in our bodies, not just what we can touch with our hands. So we have the sense of seeing with our eyes, hearing with our ears, feeling with our bodies and our hands, tasting with our mouths, and smelling with our noses. God gave us these 5 tools to allow us to know things, to learn about things. The 5 senses: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. And you know, that's how we learn about things that we come into contact with every day. How can you tell if someone's visiting the house? By hearing a knock on the door. If you want to see what the weather's like, you go to the door and look outside. If someone serves you a meal and you're not sure what it is because you've never seen it before, you find out by tasting it or by smelling it and by looking at it. So we use our senses to learn about things, and our senses help us to know things. And God designed us to use these 5 senses to know things. Okay? When we use our senses to know things, to learn things, we say that we perceive things. We perceive things. We perceive with our senses. And the word perceive is written up here, and you can see it's spelled P-E-R-C-E-I-V-E. We perceive with our five senses. And we know what those five senses are. Okay? So when we learn and when we know things using our senses, our five senses, we perceive those things. Okay? Now, God has given us other ways of knowing things, not just by the senses, not just by perceiving things, but God has also given us tools that allow us to be conscious of things. A couple different tools God created us with to help us to learn more, to know more, not just our senses. One of the tools that God has given us is memory. So we can remember things. We may see something one day, and the next day or many years later, we can remember what we saw. So our memory helps us to know things. And God has also given us a power called reasoning that helps us to learn and know things. The faculty or the power of reasoning. So we can perceive with our senses, with our five senses, but we also have other ways of knowing things. Anything that we know, we are conscious of. So we are conscious of anything that we know. We are conscious of anything that we know. We may be conscious of things we cannot perceive. We may be conscious of things we cannot perceive. So there are things which we can know, but we can't see them. We can't hear them. We can't feel them. We can't taste them. And we can't smell them. But we can still be conscious of them. We can still know them. So we can be conscious of things and we can perceive things. But everything that we perceive, we are also conscious of. So everything that we know, we are conscious of. Some things we can perceive, but everything we know, we are conscious of. And some things that we know, we can perceive. Okay? We perceive with our senses. These are the five senses. But we may be conscious of things we cannot perceive. Another way that we can be conscious of things that we have never perceived is by learning. We can learn from other people about things that we have never perceived. I can learn about a mountain in China that I have never seen. I can learn by words. Someone can tell me about it. Someone can write about it. Someone can draw a picture. And I can see a picture that allows me to know about something that I've never actually seen before. So we may be conscious of many things that we have never perceived ourselves with our senses. All right? Now, the next point we learn in our lesson here, which is what we're learning so that we can get ready to study English grammar, is that an object is anything that we can perceive or of which we may be conscious. An object is anything we can perceive or of which we may be conscious. So anything that we can know, anything that we may be conscious of, is called an object. Anything that we can know, or anything that we do know, is called an object. We can perceive objects, or we may be conscious of objects even if we haven't perceived them. An object is anything we can perceive or of which we may be conscious. It's important to remember that there are more things that we may be conscious of, because all the things that we can perceive are included in the number of things that we can be conscious of. So we can be conscious of many things, and some of those things we may also perceive. All right? Everything that we can perceive, we are conscious of. Everything that we perceive, we are conscious of. But not everything that we are conscious of can we perceive. Okay? Now, as I said before, one way that we can be conscious of something is by learning about it from someone else. Maybe someone else saw a beautiful flower and they'd like to tell us about it. Maybe someone else tasted some delicious food and they want to tell us about it. Maybe someone smelled a beautiful rose or some perfume and they want to tell us about it. We can learn about things, we can be conscious of things by words spoken or written by other people. So, an object is anything we can perceive or of which we may be conscious, but we share our thoughts using words. We share our thoughts using words. Now, when we're conscious of something, we have an image in our minds, and that image is called an idea. An image in our mind is called an idea. When we're conscious of something, we have an idea of that thing. And we can share our ideas with other people. The way that we share our ideas is with words. We use words. There are other ways we can share ideas. We can share ideas by drawing pictures and things like that, but usually when we want to share our ideas with other people, we use words. What is a word? Our lesson teaches us that a word is a syllable or a combination of syllables used in the expression of thought. A word is a syllable or a combination of syllables used in the expression of thought. And when we say the expression of thought, what we mean is sharing ideas. So we could change this to say a word is a syllable or a combination of syllables used to share ideas. Maybe that's a better definition, all right? But the definition in our lesson is a word is a syllable or a combination of syllables used in the expression of thought, okay? Now, just in case you're not sure what a syllable is just a spoken sound, a spoken sound. It could be the sound of a vowel like ah or o or a, or it could be the sound of a syllable that's made up of different vowels and consonants like ba, be, bi, bo, bu. These are all syllables. Any spoken sound is a syllable. A word can be made of one syllable, like dog. Dog is one syllable. Or a combination of syllables, like eagle. Eagle is two syllables. A word made up of two syllables. So a word is a syllable, a spoken sound, or a combination of syllables, more than one syllable, used in the expression of thought, okay, or used to share ideas. So, in the world, all around us, everything that God has made, we can say that all of the things that God has created are objects. They are things that we may be conscious of or perceive. Everything that God has created is an object, something that we may perceive or of which we may be conscious. Some things that God has created can be perceived. We can see them, hear them, feel them, taste them, or smell them. But many things that God has created cannot be perceived. For example, a spirit has no body. It cannot be perceived. But we may be conscious of a spirit. Certain things like feelings. Now, when we say a feeling like love or happiness or sadness, things like that, we don't mean the same thing that we mean here by feeling. Okay, feeling here, when we say feeling is one of the five senses, we mean the ability to feel something with our body, right? And I gave some examples, like we can touch things, we can feel that something is soft or something is rough. We can feel cold air or hot water. We can feel things with our bodies. That's what we mean when we talk about the sense of feeling. But we also have feelings, a different kind of feeling, and we can feel things like happiness, sadness. We can feel bored. We can feel tired. We can feel confused. All these different ideas are also objects that we can maybe not perceive, but we can be conscious of them. And God has created all of these things, things that are visible and things that are invisible, things that can be touched and things that cannot be touched, things that can be tasted and smelled and things that cannot be tasted and smelled. God has created all of these different things, and these are all objects, okay? But when we perceive them or are conscious of them, we have an idea of them, an image or a picture in our minds that we keep, as if our mind was some kind of camera, and we have ideas, and we can think about our own ideas, but we can also share our ideas. And when we share our ideas, we share them with words. Now, sharing our ideas is very important. It's very important for us to be able to share our ideas or to learn ideas from other people. And because we share ideas with words, words become very important. And the study of words, learning about words, is a very important study. And as we're going to learn in the next lesson, the study of words is done in grammar. So this class, English Grammar 1, is a very important class because it teaches us how to share ideas, how to share our ideas with other people, and also how to learn ideas from other people. Okay? So we're going to learn more about that in lesson 2. In our first lesson, we learned some very important things to help us get started in English grammar. We learned that anything we can know, or anything that we do know, we may be conscious of, or we are conscious of anything that we can know. And the things that we know are called objects. Objects, all of the things that God has created, are things that we can know. We can be conscious of them, or we can perceive them. Some things we can perceive, some things we can know, but we cannot perceive. There are other ways of knowing things. All right, so we learned what it means to perceive things, to know things with our senses. We learned what our 5 senses are, these 5 tools that God has given us to help us to know Him and to know the things that He's created. We learned that the things that God has created are called objects. An object is anything that we can perceive with our senses or of which we may be conscious. These are objects. And then we learned that for every object we are conscious of, we have an idea, and we share those ideas with words. And we learned that a word is a syllable or a combination of syllables that's used in the expression of thought or in sharing ideas. So that's the content of our first lesson in English grammar. What you need to do is study this lesson and make sure you know all of these things. All right? I'll ask you a few questions to help you with that. First of all, how many senses do we have? How many senses do we have? You should say, we have 5 senses. We have 5 senses. Name the 5 senses. It's okay if you look at the board behind me. Name the 5 senses. What's the first sense? The first sense is seeing. What's the second sense? The second sense is hearing. What's the third sense? The third sense is feeling. What's the fourth sense? The fourth sense is tasting. And the fifth sense is smelling. These are the 5 senses. All right? Name some things, or think of some things that we can perceive. What are some things that we can perceive? Think of some things that we can perceive. I'll name a few. We can perceive the sun. We can look outside and we can see the sun. We can also feel the heat of the sun. Something else we can perceive the birds outside. We can see the birds flying. We can see their beautiful colors. We can hear the birds singing. We can perceive the birds. We can perceive food. We can perceive food. We can taste food. We can smell food. We can perceive food. Those are some things that we can perceive. I said we can perceive the sun, we can perceive birds, we can perceive food, and you can think of many more things that we can perceive. Everything that God has made that's in the world that we can see and hear and feel and taste and smell can be perceived. Okay? Now, let's look at the next word here. What are some things that we cannot perceive, but we may be conscious of? What are some things that we may be conscious of, but we cannot perceive? Can you think of any things that we may be conscious of, but we cannot perceive? I told you one before, a spirit. In catechism, we learn that a spirit is a creature that does not have a body. We can know about a spirit, we can be conscious of a spirit, but we cannot perceive a spirit. All right, so that's one thing we may be conscious of, but not perceive. Another thing that we can be conscious of and not perceive is an idea that someone shares with us. An idea that someone shares with us. If someone takes a vacation and they see a beautiful mountain, they can tell us about the mountain and we can be conscious of the mountain, but we cannot see the mountain. We cannot perceive the mountain. So there are some things that God has created that we cannot perceive, like a spirit. There are other things like feelings I talked about before, like happiness, sadness, love, hatred, different feelings we can be conscious of, but we really don't perceive them. All right? And then another thing, or lots of other things that we can be conscious of, are ideas that people share with us. All right? And then the fourth question I'd like to ask is, what is an object? What is an object? What is an object? we learned right up here, an object is anything we can know. Anything that we can know is an object. Anything that we may be conscious of or anything that we may perceive is an object. All of the things that God has created may be called objects. And then lastly, what is a word? What is a word? A word is a syllable or combination of syllables that's used in the expression of thought. A word is a spoken sound that's used to share an idea. A word is a spoken sound that's used to share an idea. Okay, that's all the content for lesson 1. You should watch this video as many times as you'd like to make sure that you learn everything that we've talked about in this lesson, but you can also read your lesson in your online course and study it there. Make sure you know the meaning of every word that we've studied and that you understand every point that we've talked about, because in our next lesson, we're going to build on this and learn more about English grammar. I hope that's a helpful lesson. If you have any questions or need anything explained further, please contact us and we'll help you. God bless your studies.